Hey you guys, it's been a few days since my last upload, but I'm back here with a new, very fun expanded deck I've been testing and playing with lately. It's a Mew Counterbox variant, utilizes mostly Mew, the baby Mew from Fates Collide, with a number of basic techie kind of attackers in order to assimilate an entire competitively viable deck. Start off with Mew. Obviously, it's the main card in the deck. From Fates Collide, has 50 HP, free retreat, which is very important. Has the ability Memories of Dawn, which is similar to Mew GX. This Pokemon is able to copy the attacks of your basic Pokemon in play. It's not quite as good, can't copy the ones with discard or anything like that, but it can copy the ones in play, basic Pokemon. It has a colorless attack with Encounter. You search your deck for Pokemon, reveal it. It's an okay attack. You don't really ever use it unless you absolutely have to. But that's the decks around him, or her, it. I got four of them. Your next main kind of pseudo, literally, attacker is a pseudo Wudo with Watch and Learn from Breakpoint. It's one fighting colorless attack. You can copy whatever move your opponent used last turn. So a rolling theme with this deck is Dimension Valley and counter cards that let you get a little bit of an edge on your opponent if you're behind on prize cards, or with Dimension Valley just in general. Colorless less for each psychic type. So you can essentially watch and learn for one energy on a Mew if you have D-Valley in play, or attach a double colorless energy, whatever, to counter energy. Copy, watch, and learn. It's super good against fighting weakness variants, so like Pika Rom and Zoroark, and the other one is Dark Box. That's why you run two of them. It's the only card you run two of, or multiples of, other than Mew, because it's just so powerful and so strong. One of the other Pokemon you run, among many, is Shaman from Shining Legends, with the Rally Back attack for grass and a colorless. It does 30 damage, and if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage, which is important, during your opponent's last turn, it does 90 more damage. So for one energy, you can deal 120 damage, which is pretty good. You can potentially hit for weakness with Mew, or with the grass Shaman itself. It depends on matchups, obviously, but it's good to have a bunch of types in the deck. Its alternate attack, Flippity Flap. It lets you shuffle your hand to your deck and draw 6. It's a good attack if you're kind of stuck. If you had to use it a couple times, and it's a pretty strong attack to have on a Pokemon, to be honest, considering Shaman's kind of one of the ones that you just sit on your bench forever and you just rally back every so often. One of the next attackers is Ultra Necrozma from Cosmic Eclipse. Ultra Necrozma is an interesting card because it has an insanely powerful attack. For 2 energies, a Psychic and a Steel, it does 170 damage, and it also discards an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. The drawback, of course, of this Pokemon is it cannot attack unless your opponent has 2 or fewer prize cards remaining. But that doesn't mean it can't be copied by Mew. So if you're able to put counter energy on Mew, or just 2 Rainbow or Prism energies on Mew, you're able to use Luster of Downfall without any repercussions. It's an insanely strong attack. It's definitely earned its spot in this deck, just being on sheer power of force, not even tech. Just hitting 170 is just an insane number for a deck like this to be able to hit. Next attacker we have is Victini. It is from Lost Thunder. It has a fire and a colorless attack. If you beat down, it does 20 times each basic Pokemon you have in play. So by default, it caps at 120. Skyfield, you can do a lot more, but you generally just 120. Honestly, in testing, I haven't used this attack very often. I find myself using Copycat or Rally Back more, just because there seem to be more consistent attacks out there that your opponent uses against you generally. But in the occasions I have had to use it, it's such a good attack. It's definitely one of the staples of this deck. It's one of the most important cards in the deck, but it's one of the cards you'll probably be able to take out just because it's 120, and if anything else ever came out that did a more consistent amount of damage without you needing to have a full bench, it's quite a strong, or quite the powerhouse that you can get rid of. It's kind of a weird way of putting it, but yeah. Next up, we have a Mr. Mime with Bench Barrier. Obviously, we can't run Mew, the new one, with Bench Barrier because you can only have 4 Pokemon of the same name. We already have 4 Mews in the deck. So Mr. Mime's the next best thing. It has a Cybolt attack, flip a coin if heads, defending Pokemon's not paralyzed. It's a decent attack. I mean, if you ever had to use it, it's a good attack to just have, I suppose. But you never really use it, honestly. It's just good ability. Obviously, you run it in 4 bench barrier. Oranguru from Sun and Moon base set. Obviously, this card is a staple in most one prize decks. It's a basic that once during your turn lets you draw up to 3, or until you have 3 cards in your hand. Not much else to say about it. It's just such a good card. You need this card in your deck. Yeah, it helps you not die to end in the late game. Psychic is a decent attack. Don't really ever use it though. The other Oranguru you have is the one from Ultra Prism with resource management. Many of you have probably seen this card in control style decks and just decks that try to outlast your opponent. For colorless, you have to put 3 cards from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck in any order. So it saves you against like mill and shock lock kind of stuff. This deck is prepared to deal with shock locks. Usually you don't lose to shock lock, you'll tie. You could probably never beat shock lock, honestly, but tying is just about as good. It's a hell of a lot better than losing to it. Its other attack, Profound Knowledge, 60 damage and confuses. Very niche situations, but probably never, honestly, ever going to be used. Next up, we also another anti-control, kind of keep you in the game card. We have Sableye from Dark Explorers. This card usually has its own deck of just, outlasting your opponent, like I said earlier, and controlling the board state. But in this deck, it's just quite a strong attack, whereas, say, you get End, you junk hunt, you put a VS Seeker back in your hand, and whatever else you want, a Nest Ball, Special Charge, anything really. And you kind of force your opponent an N on you to get rid of those cards, or they just let you have those cards, and you probably run away with the game from there. Super strong attack, super powerful, niche, techie card for this deck. And it puts your opponent in very awkward situations where if they want a Guzma, or say they don't want to kill the Sableye, they want to kill a Mew or something, they can't. Especially with Surge being gone now. Next attacker we have up is Oricorio. Oricorio from Guardians Rising, one with Supernatural Dance, that lets you put 1 damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like for each Pokemon in their discard. So this card's mostly used against Night March, Vespiquen, and Mew. Mew being a main contender in this deck because it can shut you down with its copying of Noivern's Special Energy move. I forget what it's called, the one that doesn't let you play Stadium Specials or Tools. Just Specials? I think it's just Specials. My apologies. So you can attack for free with Dimension Valley, which is almost always in play against Mew. And they usually have at least like 10 or so Pokemon in their discard, so you're just able to chain 10 damage a turn or 100 damage a turn, and however you like it. It's super strong. Night March, obviously, super strong. You just put damage counters all willy-nilly. I don't think you ever lose to Night March in this deck, just because you have so many ways of copying the Oricorio's move that it's almost impossible to lose. Next attacker we have is another one of the heavy hitters. We have a Necrozma from Unified Minds. This one its main attack is Special Laser. For 2 Psychic and a colorless, it does 100 damage, and if it has a special energy attached to it, it does 60 more. So every energy in this deck is a special energy deck, is a special energy card. So if you're ever using this attack, it's always going to do 160 damage, which is just good. It's barrier attack, 30 damage, and next turn takes 30 less for 2 colorless. Decent attack, not why you run it though. Special Laser is evidently why you run this card. It's very comparable to the White Kyurem from an older set that did 80 damage and then 80 more if it had a fire energy on it. This card I believe is just 100 times better because of the fact to retreat, it itself can use Dimension Valley, so you don't have to put a counter gain on it in order to use its attack for 1 attachment. And barrier attack I think is just better than Field Crush, but mostly just Dimension Valley to retreat, the important parts. Next attacker you have up is Tapu Fini from Unified Minds. This card is single-handedly the reason you probably beat Buzz, or Baby Buzz Shrine, whatever it's called, because of Nature Wave. It's 2 water and 1 colorless attacks. It does 100 damage, but if your opponent has any Ultra Beasts in play, and it's on their bench or on the discard or on the bench or as an active, it can be used for colorless. So if you have a Mew in the active and you have this thing on the bench, Mew can copy Nature Wave for free if you have Dimension Valley in play, dealing 200 damage presumably to the Garbodor or Buzzhole they have in the active, and you just kind of sweep from there. Only drawback is Mew has 50 HP, so usually they take a knockout back. So you kind of want to play the Egon game and get the first knockout and try to disrupt their hand if you can. Next attacker, Articuno from Roaring Skies with the Delta Plus ability, which means if your opponent's active Pokemon's knocked out by it, you take an extra prize card. So super strong against those Buzz decks, Night March, any really one prize deck, or just if you're able to get a GX or Tag Team down to low enough health where 60 damage will kill it. I say 60 because that's about the average you'll roll with this attack. You'll see in a second. For 2 water and a colorless, it hits 20 damage plus 40 more for each heads you flip off of 3 coins. So you flip 3 coins, usually at least one will be heads, and you'll hit 60 damage. 60 is kind of the break point you want to aim for with this card. If you can avoid having to force yourself to roll 2 or 3. If you're in a situation where you have to roll 2, you're going to have to get lucky with it. It's probably a better attacker to use just to consistently get the knockout. But if you have to roll 2 or more to win the game, this is definitely a good card to rely on. And then finally, the last Pokemon we have in this deck is Giratina from Lost Thunder. Nothing too special about this card other than the fact that it brings itself back. That's probably the only reason I run it, is because it's a free rescue stretcher if it's in the discard. It does 130 for 2 Psychic and a colorless, and you put 4 damage counters on one of your Pokemon. So its attack's not the best in a deck like this, but the fact it just comes back and can just keep steamrolling hits and being copied, etc., is why it's run. On to the trainer cards. We're going to start with the items first, and then we'll get to the supporters and stadiums and energy. We run 2 Nest Balls, because everything's a basic Pokemon. 2 is all you really need. 2 Rescue Stretchers, because again, everything in this deck is basically a singleton, so you're going to want to consistently be able to get attackers back if they get knocked out, or if your opponent tries to Guzma and kill something, you can just get it back quite easily. 3 VS Seekers, pretty standard. Computer Search, insane card in this deck, definitely needed. Special Charge, like I said earlier, every energy in this deck is a special energy. Prism energies and counter energies are especially important in this deck, so you don't ever really want to be in a situation where you're out of either of those. One of those, 1 switch, 1 town map. Town map, again, is really important because there's a lot of cards in this deck that are singleton, including in the trainers, including the items. So being able to pick your prize cards is an insane advantage, and one that could probably win you games, knowing what you're going to draw and if you can play an N or not, and just, again, tech situations. Cards super important in this deck, really strong. A single Field Blower, help you deal with, say, Silent Labs or Garbatoxin and whatnot. 2 Counter Catchers, because this is a counter deck, it's a 1 prize deck, and it kind of starts rolling once you start losing. Counter Catcher is just a staple in a deck like this. Able to gust something up for free and play a supporter, obviously insanely powerful. 1 Battle Compressor just for consistency. If you want to dump stuff from your deck, say Tina, or you need a supporter, anything like that, it's a good card to have. I chose to run 2 Muscle Bands instead of Choice Bands, mostly for the fact that you don't really ever one-shot a GX that you wouldn't one-shot with a Muscle Band. I don't think there's ever really a situation where Muscle or Choice Band would be crucial over Muscle Band, and being able to hit the 1 prizers for an extra 20, or non-GXers for an extra 20, is a lot stronger than you would probably imagine in this deck like this, especially with the Ultra Necrozma deck being quite popular now. Tapu Fini being able to hit it 120, or Mew copying at 120 is really good. 1 Counter Gain, again, counter deck. Counter Gain's like a free energy attachment, if anything has a colorless attack, if you're losing, but that's kind of what you do in this deck. Next up, we got Great Catcher. One of super strong card printed in the Cosmic Eclipse. Lets you discard 2, pull something up, pull up an EX or a GX. In a deck like this, a card like this is insane. Especially I've noticed in the late game where you're kind of tied on prizes, you're both at 2. Counter Catcher isn't good enough because obviously you can't play it. So having Great Catcher there to help you close out the game is crucial. Now on to the supporters. Not very many in this deck, but they get the job done. We run 2 Teammates. Teammates obviously lets you search 2 cards if one of your opponent was knocked out, or one of your active Pokemon was knocked out in the last turn. You can search your deck for 2 cards. 4 Professor Sycamores, Junipers, or Professor Research, whatever they're called now. Discard your hand, draw 7, obviously. One N, you don't really want to use N, you want to use either Sycamore or Teammates if you don't have to use an N. Pokemon Ranger helps get rid of item lock, helps get rid of special energy lock. Just super strong card, mostly for the Mew matchup or control Toad stuffs. And one Guzma, just standard Guzma. If you need it, you have it. It's a good card. 3-dimension values, because like I said, you kind of depend on the card of Mew. One Power Plant. Against Mew, against Zoroark, against a few decks, this card can save you, especially in the early to late game if you put it down and they're not able to get rid of it and say they have to Dedenne or Lele or something of that nature. Power Plant is a super good card, but it's also probably the first card I would cut if you want to add something to the deck. First card I'd cut is definitely Power Plant. 4 counter energies. Yeah, 2 rainbow energies for free if you're losing is really good. Prism energy, it's rainbow energy but better. It doesn't put a damage counter on it because it only provides rainbows to basic Pokemon. Everything in decks are basic, easy game. And 2 rainbows just for consistency. 4 prisms is not enough. You run 2 to 3 rainbows in every variant of a deck. This deck I've seen, just because of consistency. Consistency is what wins you this deck and or wins you matchups, and rainbow is very important. So yeah, that's the deck. Here are some honorable mentions of cards I thought about putting in but ultimately didn't, and some cards you can kind of swap between. The Ultra Beast package, they're very strong attacks, but it's based on the amount of prize cards you have, so you can't really just let them sit on your bench ultimately and not do anything, and once you pass that prize threshold, that's mostly why I decided to cut them. They do have decent secondary attacks, but you want better consistent attackers. They exist for a reason. These cards didn't make it just because of that fact, though they are their own deck with Buzzhole and Garbodor, and you tech Nihilego Kartana just because they're good cards, so they're better off sticking to their own deck. Cobalion from Steam Siege has a very strong late game attack with Revenge Blast, dealing 30 damage and 30 more for each prize your opponent has taken. Its secondary attack Quick Guard, very strong, prevents all damage to it, or whatever uses it, by basic Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. So against Pikarom, Mew, stuff like that, it can make you immune for a turn, very strong. It hits Steel weakness, which is why I was so torn on not putting it in, but I think you just lose to Guardian anyways, that it doesn't matter. I don't think you get to the late game being able to one-shot a Guardian enough, or consistently enough without some luck, that it's worth running. As soon as they print a better Steel attacker that can maybe hit at least 160? I think it's 160. Then I'll put that in probably, but right now you just get GX'd by the Sylvia or Guardian, and you kind of lose from there. You don't really ever beat Guardian. I also can't use Dimension Value with Mew, so Mew can't get value off it because its attacks are all costed. They're not any colorless, they're all colored costed. The other copycat Pokemon, Mimikyu, I was close to putting the Psychic one in, just because of the power of Filch is very good in certain spots, and it itself being able to utilize Dimension Valley was a very good, it's a very good alternate effect. But ultimately, you have Mew already to copycat with Dimension Valley, so you really don't need another one. But having Filch in the deck is a good attack. But ultimately, Sudowoodo hits more, or is better. It can copy GX attacks, which maybe you cannot. It hits fighting weakness, so again, the Pikarom, the Zoroark, and the Darkrai, Dark Fox kind of decks, Sudowoodo's MVP in. After that, we have the spread kind of package, or you could just run one of each and kind of tech your deck out with Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, and the Mimikyu that shuts down GX abilities if they have any damage counters on them. In mirror-esque matchups, Tapu Koko is really strong. You just kind of keep spread, and then ultimately just clear their board. But this deck isn't popular enough, and that win style isn't consistent enough to warrant running it. I know it has free retreat. I know it can be used for one less with Dimension Valley, but ultimately it's just not worth it. Shutting down Mew's ability is really good with Mimikyu. So at first I thought about it, but then I realized almost every Mew deck every deck that's dependent on GX abilities plays Stealthy Hood. So once I put the Stealthy Hood on it, your Mimikyu's worthless, you're wasting a bench slot, and bench space in this deck is very important. Moving damage around also with the Tapu Lele, not good with this deck. There's not enough spread inherently in it, and you don't really want to spread damage, you kind of just want to kill things and end the game quick. So that's why I decided not to run either of these. Next up is the Resolute Blade-esque attack. For 2 colored attack, either 2 water or 2 fire, depending on the Pokemon you use it on, Entei or Keldeo. You do 20 plus 20 for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if your opponent has a full bench, on average, we'll say ignoring Skyfield, you'll do 120 damage. Is that good enough to run without being able to get value off Dimension Valley? No, it's not. The attack is not good enough. You need to put a counter on it or 2 rainbow attachments, which is not worth 120 damage. If you have to put 2 rainbows on something, you expect to at least get a knockout or deal, say, 160-esque plus for a cost like that. Their secondary attacks on both of them are equally terrible, with Keldeo's being put a water Pokemon into your hand from your discard, and Entei milling you for 4. It's just not worth running. There are better attacks that exist now, i.e. Ultra Necrozma. Just 100% better than this card. Don't need to run it. Used to be run, but not anymore. This card, Order Pad, was originally in my list. I played it. It was good. It did win me some games, but it didn't necessarily lose me games, but I didn't get heads, so it was a dead card. So did it lose me the game? I'll never know, but probably. It enables you to search for any item in your deck. In a deck that's mostly items, it's a very strong effect if you flip heads. But if you flip tails, it's a dead card. Dead cards are bad. You don't want cards in your deck that don't do anything, especially in a deck that's as tight as this, with almost every card being a singleton. On the other hand, every card being a singleton, having 4 cards that 50% of the time get you the exact card you need is pretty good. But it's not good enough to run, I'd say, over just multiple copies of the cards you need. I'm still working on it. It's a good fill card if you're cutting cards, like I said, Power Plant or stuff like that, but it's not worth running at the moment with better cards just straight up existing, and also just having teammates that lets you search your deck for 2 cards. So yeah, that's the deck. It runs pretty fluidly. I've never really had mega consistency issues. Again, this is a deck that's designed to lose a little at first, so having a slow start is completely normal for the deck if you have to use Flippity Flap to get some draw, or just encounter to slowly build up your board state. Once you start swinging back with those copycats and stuff like that, and the Ultra Necrozma attacks, you'll be probably winning your games a decent amount of the time, assuming you play your cards right, and rationing energies is severely important. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next 6 months with a new video in a few days, and yeah, take care.